Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. So here's another deck profile for you guys today. To kick off September, I decided to go with my Endymion Pendulum deck. Now, it's a deck I haven't picked up in quite a while, and last time I showcased this deck, the deck had just got back into full power, especially with Servant of Endymion now back at 3, and I just wanted to see what I could do with the deck. And since then, I haven't really picked up on the strategy, mainly because this deck, does require a lot of skill to pilot. But once you kind of get the handle of the gimmick, it's a pretty easy deck to play, and it's a lot of fun once you get used to it. So I figured I'd go back and see what I could improve on, and I actually came up with some pretty cool ideas with it, and the combos in this deck are pretty insane. So figured I'd just share with you guys what I came up with, and yeah, let's get started. The main deck, if I'm not mistaken, is 41 cards like last time. Starting off with 2 copies of Endymion, the Mighty Master of Magic. The cool thing about this engine is that everything pretty much came in a structure deck. But here's what this card does. The Pendulum effect states that you can remove 6 spell counters from the field, especially on this card. And if you do, count the number of cards you control that have spell counters, destroy up to that many cards on the field. So it can be on either player's side of the field. And if you do, place spell counters on this card equal to the number of cards that were destroyed. Now, its monster effect states that when a spell or trap or effect is activated, quick effect, you can return 1 card you control with a spell counter to the hand, and if you do, negate the activation and destroy that card. Then you can place the same number of counters that the card that you bounce back to this card. So, like example, if you bounce back, let's say Mythical Beast Jackal King, and it had 3 counters, you basically get to place 3 counters on Mighty Master of Magic. Now, while this card has a spell counter, your opponent cannot target this card with card effects, also cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects. When this card with a spell counter is destroyed by battle, you can add 1 normal spell from your deck to your hand, and this searches out any normal spell, so that's pretty nuts. Next, 3 copies of Servant of Endymion. Now, each of the other Endymion monsters have pretty much a similar clause, which actually, let's just go and get into it. Playing 2 copies of Magister and 1 Reflection of Endymion. Before I was playing this at 2, but I cut it down to 1 simply because it's the weakest of the bunch. But they all have, like I said, a similar clause. With Servant, you can remove 3 spell counters in terms of its Pendulum effect from itself, special summon it, and then you can special summon 1 monster from your deck that can hold a spell counter. And then Magister summons 1 from extra deck, and Reflection summons 1 from hand. And again, each of these are basically the same thing. It just depends on where you get to summon that additional monster. And then, of course, you're never really going to use their monster effects, so I'm not really going to get into it. But if you do decide to go into it, Servant lets you discard a card and place a spell counter on another card. Magister, if it declares an attack, you place a spell counter on it. And then with Reflection, you can target 1 card your opponent controls and 1 card you control with a spell counter except itself. Return that opponent's card to the hand and your card back to the hand. So yeah, it's kind of weird. But again, you're mostly just going to use these solely for their Pendulum effects. And the reason why Servant was limited for so long is because it was a 1-card Electrolyte. But now that it's back at 3, yeah, it's definitely one of our main openers. But yeah, that pretty much runs up our Endymion package. Next up, for our Mythical Beast package, I'm playing 2 copies of Master Sorcerers. Once again, this is probably going to be the only one you'll use solely for its Pendulum effect, but if you do manage to get it out as a monster, its banishing effect does come in handy. But the most important part of it is that it's a searcher. So, like, if you have no other cards in your Pendulum Zone, you can destroy this card. And if you do, add 1 level 7 or lower Mythical Beast effect monster from your deck to your hand. So it's a great way to get Jackal King to your hand. Or if you need to get to Garuda or even Jackal, yeah, this card's pretty strong. Speaking of which, 2 copies of Mythical Beast Jackal King. If you control no other card in your Pendulum Zone, you can destroy this card. And if you do, special summon 1 face-up Mythical Beast Pendulum monster from your extra deck except itself. And of course, you can only use this effect once per turn. Now, one cool thing about Jackal King is that this is the one you generally want on as a monster. Each time a spell card is activated, place 2 spell counters on this card whenever that spell resolves. Once per turn, when an opponent's activated monster effect, if your opponent activates a monster effect, quick effect, you can remove 2 spell counters from your field, negate the activation, and if you do, destroy that card. And keep in mind, that's a soft once per turn. So, like, you could have 2 Jackal Kings, and yeah, you basically get 2 monster negates just like that, and it's pretty strong. Next up, 1 Mythical Beast Garuda. If you control no other cards in your Pendulum Zone, you can target 1 other spell or trap on the field, destroy both it and this card, and of course you can only use this effect once per turn. Each time a spell card is activated, place 1 spell counter on this card, and when a spell when your opponent normal or special summons a monster except during the damage step, you can remove 3 spell counters from the field, special summon this card from your hand, and then return that opponent's monster or monsters to the hand. So yeah, it's a great way. It's basically like compulsory, and it's great for disruption. So yeah, like basically you just got yourself a free searchable hand trap essentially. And then the one last card to play to round up our Mythical Beast engine, one Mythical Beast Jackal. For its pendulum effect, if you control no other card in your pendulum zone, you can pop it and then place a spell counter on any card you want. So essentially, you get to boost up your spell counters more frequently with this one. And the monster effects that each time a spell is activated, you place a spell counter, remove 3 spell counters, and then you can tribute this card, special summon 1 Mythical Beast effect monster from your deck to accept itself. So yeah, pretty good. And one thing I do like about Jackal is that it's searchable not just through Master Cerberus, but also through Magical Abductor. Now, Magical Abductor, you mostly want it for its pendulum effect. Each time a spell card is activated, place 1 spell counter on this card. And then you can remove 3 spell counters. You can add 1 pendulum monster from your deck to your hand. Also, a soft once per turn, so if you can manage to pop Magical Abductor off your pendulum zone somehow, you get to basically activate a new one and then just basically use that effect again. And of course, its monster effect literally does the exact same thing, only you can only search out a level 1 spellcaster monster. So that's one of the cool things about it. Alright, so now for the next part of my engine, playing 3 copies of Chronograph Sorcerer. I've been thinking about running this at 2 and then bumping Magical Abductor to 3, but let me know in the comments what you guys think. I like it because the fact that it's a scale 8, but also during your main phase, you can destroy this card, and if you do, take 1 Time Gazer Magician, either special summon it or add it to your hand. Or you can place it in your Pendulum zone. And if a card you control is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can special summon this card from your hand. Then you can special summon 1 monster from your hand. But of course, it's actually pretty good because, you know, it's a great way just to always have a body on the field. Of course, you got to play 1 Time Gazer to go with it. I also play 1 Astrograph Sorcerer. This card is currently limited for a good reason, actually. But kind of the same thing. If a card you control is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can special summon this card, and then you can choose 1 monster in the graveyard, extra deck, or that is banished that was destroyed this turn. Add that one monster with the same name from your deck to your hand. So like a great way just to, like, you know, just get additional value essentially. But moving on. For the Pendulum Magicians, I'm playing 2 copies of Harmonizing. Harmonizing is crazy because it special summons any Pendulum Magician monster from your deck. Of course, its effects are negated, and you have to banish it when it leaves the field. But this basically essentially enables me to go into Baron de Fleur or even Borreload Savage Dragon. But if I'm going for Baron de Fleur, which is going to be the most likely case, my main target's going to be Oath Dragon Magician because it's a level 6. So yeah, this plus Harmonizing, instant Baron de Fleur. But I do have some other Pendulum Magicians. I got Performer Pal Celestial Magician. This card actually has effects based on whenever it's normal or special summon, and based on whatever you control, like Fusion, Synchro, Xyz, and Pendulum, will determine like which effects you're going to be using. But for Pendulum, most of all, you get to essentially get an additional Pendulum monster from your deck to your hand during the end phase, so just bear that in mind. I also play 1 White Wing Magician, just as an additional tuner if I need it. 1 Purple Poison, and the only non-Pendulum monster I'm playing is Spellbook Magician of Prophecy, because, you know, I do like to play the Spellbook engine, because, you know, it just gets you a lot of value. One thing just to let you guys know is that this deck is vulnerable to Droll Lock Bird. In fact, that's this deck's worst enemy, and this is exactly why I like to run the Pendulum Magician engine, because if I can get Baron de Fleur out as early as possible, I can essentially play around Droll Lock Bird. But anyway, moving on to spells already. 3 copies of Spell Power Mastery. Searches out any 1 Endymion card from your deck to your hand, and then you could basically place any number of spell counters to whatever can hold a spell counter, based on however many copies you have on the field or in the grave. So like, if it's the only one I've activated the first turn, you basically get to place 2 spell counters almost immediately. Next, 2 copies of Spellbook of Secrets. Again, the Spellbook engine is pretty strong in this deck, so definitely take advantage of it. 2 copies of Knowledge. 2 Pendulum Call. Great way just to get access to your Pendulum Magician monsters as early as possible. 1 Instant Fusion. I do like to go into Millenniumizer Strict, which again helps me play around hand traps. Again, especially Droll Lock Bird. Also got the 1 Called by the Grave just in case. For some additional draw power, I got Into the Void and 1 Upstart Goblin. You know, pretty self-explanatory. Now, the extra deck's the one that kind of got the most changes here. So, starting off with 2 copies of Selene, Queen of the Master Magicians. I was playing this at 3 before because, you know, it was like essentially one of your best Link monsters. But now I decided to bump it down to 2 just for specific reasons. But it requires 2+ monsters, including a spellcaster, so relatively easy to make. If this card is linked summon, you can place spell counters equal to the number of spells that are in your grave or currently on your field, and this can include your pendulum monsters too. So, I mean, the ones in your pendulum scales, I mean. But you can remove 3 spell counters, special summon 1 spellcaster in your graveyard in defense mode to one of its link arrows. And this is important because, and again, I'm going to show you why in just a second. But yeah, like it's great. It's essentially a monster reborn. Also, while you control an Endymion monster or Endymion card, your opponent cannot target this card for attacks. So it's pretty nice because, like, yeah, it essentially has its own built-in protection. New addition to the extra deck, playing 1 copy of Artemis. Now, this is actually why I use Celine's Monster Reborn effect. So if I special summon back one of my spellcasters, especially if it's a level 4 or below, I can link off into Artemis, and just like that, I got an instant link 4, which I do have 3 different options, but we'll get into that momentarily. 1 Beyond the Pendulum requires 2+ effect monsters, including a Pendulum monster, so again, easy to summon. If this card is linked summoned from the into the extra monster zone, you can pay 1,200 life points, add 1 Pendulum monster from your deck to your hand, but for the rest of the turn, unless you Pendulum summon after this effect resolves, you cannot activate monster effects and negate the effects of any cards in your Pendulum zones are negated. If 2 monsters with different original levels are special summoned to its link zones, you get to pop 2 cards. But again, like, it's pretty good for removal, but you mostly just use it for the search effect. So again, just make sure you Pendulum summon immediately after you resolve. So yeah. Next up, 1 copy of Crowley. This essentially gives me access to my spellbook engine. It basically just does what Pantheism of the Monarchs does. You pick 3 spellbook cards of different names. Your opponent chooses one at random, and then yeah, basically just kick off with that. And if you haven't committed to your normal summon, you're basically good with just about anything, really. Now for my targets with Selene and Artemis, I play 1 Mekk-Knight Crusader Avermax. Can't be targeted for attacks, or actually, your opponent can't target any other monsters except this one for attacks. It also has a Crystal Wing based effect where it gets stronger on the it takes the attack points of the monster that attacks it. So yeah, and it can't be targeted, so pretty nice. 1 Appaloosa. Usually with Appaloosa, I always try to make sure it has at least 3 negates, but if I have to go with 2, then sometimes I will do it. Or if I need to start clearing out boards, you know, Axis Kill Talkers is definitely the way to go. So yeah, Selene and Artemis essentially makes any one of these 3. For my synchros, of course, I mentioned Baron the Floor earlier. You know, we all know what this does. 1 Borreload Savage Dragon. Bringing back an old classic, Clear Wing Fast Dragon. Quick effect, you can target 1 face-up monster your opponent controls that was special summoned from the extra deck until the end of this turn. Changes attack points to 0, also negate its effects. So, pretty good. And of course, if this card in the monster zone is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can place this in your Pendulum zone, but if not, you can always just, you know, Pendulum summon it right back. Another new card, Tilting Entertainment. If this card is synchro summon, you can special summon 1 level 4 or lower Pendulum monster from your hand or face it from the extra deck. And of course, at the end of the damage step, when this card or your Pendulum monster battles an opponent's monster, but your opponent's monster was not destroyed in that battle, you can destroy that opponent's monster. So it's pretty big, and I like it for the fact that it gives you some additional value. 1 Odd Eyes Absolute Dragon, which I actually do make it a little bit more frequently now, and along with the copy of Odd Eyes Vortex Dragon once you link it off. And yeah, you basically got another Omni Negate. And finally, 1 Millennium Eyes Restrict as my main instant fusion target. All right, for the side deck, it's pretty straightforward. You know, 3 Nibiru, just great for like any combo heavy strategy. I was thinking about main decking Droll Lock Bird, but I just didn't have the space. But if I need to side it in, you know, it's there. 3 Book of Eclipse. You know, if my opponent has like multiple negates on the board, I can at least try to bait it out. Great way just to stop like any spell heavy strategy. So like Secret Village of Spellcasters. Now, of course, this used to be like really good against Branded, but since they do actually have Spellcasters now, you just got to bear that in mind. But if they can't get access to their like Cartesia or Guiding Quim, you know, you basically just stalled them out enough. But any other strategy that doesn't play Spellcasters at all, yeah, that's pretty nuts. 1 Harpy's Feather Duster. And to deal with like floodgates and in general, 3 copies of Royal Decree. Well, that's all I got for you guys today. Hope you guys enjoyed this, and I will catch you guys again next time.